think that's, yes, up and running. Let's just check and make sure. While I check and make sure, just to mention in the link, in the description, there's a link to a video by Kellie Cowles. Kellie was in touch with me a while back to say that that's what she was going to be doing, if I remember rightly. And sure enough, just either yesterday or the day before, Millbilly sent me the link to what I believe is Kellie's, if you like, debut solo video. So absolutely great to see another Aussie getting on board and discussing the case. So very much, if you could subscribe and go over to Kellie Cowles' video, it's in the description below. I think you'll find it very interesting. So, as I say, thanks to Kellie. You did reach out to me. I do remember you saying to me about you sent me a message to say that's what you would be doing. And then, as I say, Millbilly sent me the reminder that you'd done this video. So yeah, go and check it out. Subscribe, click on that like button, do all the usual things, and in particular, we celebrate the fact that there's another channel up and running. Okie dokie. As you can see, I'm in the Dude's studio because, of course, Davontae Sanford was one of the cases that one of the many cases that Eric Jose was particularly interested in, because it's got some very interesting facets to the case. So I wasn't at all surprised, really, when I saw this tweet. I think this was on Friday from Steve Drizin. So hopefully this will not freeze like it did the other day. No, it seems to be working okay. So here we go. First of all, here's the tweet by Steve Drizin. And Steve wrote, this was, 2 days ago, so Friday. Steve wrote, "So proud of my former colleague, Megan Crane. She used to work with Laura Jay Tepfer and me at Northwestern Center for Wrongful Convictions. And now she's a rock star at this MacArthur Justice." There we go. Okay. Her work on... Too quick there. Her work on Davontae Sanford's case was stellar. So, an article called "The Other Police Violence." Let's have a look at it now. I've got 2 copies of it. I don't need that one. Let's click on that one. Remove that. And let's click on this one that was already loaded up. Okay. I say this is called "The Other Police Violence. Misconduct in interrogations and trials has sent hundreds of innocent black men to prison." And it's written September 17th, 2020 by Barbara Bradley Haggerty. Now, obviously, we're familiar with a reporter in the case called Jim Haggerty. And I wondered if there was any relationship, but I haven't been able to find anything. So if you are related, Jim and Barbara, then I do apologize for not finding that out. But let's just get rid of that. And let's come on down to see what the article discusses with regard to Davontae Sanford. What Richard Miles experienced at the hands of the police was not captured on cell phone video, did not involve a dramatic altercation with 7 bullets to the back or a neck on the knee. His experience was slow, almost invisible, but still devastating, more like a cancer than a heart attack. Miles, who spent 15 years in a Texas prison for a murder he did not commit, told me the images that are horrifying the public today are only a starting point in a sequence of events that has ruined the lives of hundreds of innocent black men who landed in prison because of police malfeasance. Well, immediately I would say it's not just black men. This does not seem to be a racist thing when it comes to this kind of misconduct, as you'll see. For Miles, the loss amounts to years spent in a cell, the death of his father before he was cleared, the stigma of having spent time in prison, and others' suspicion that he really is a killer. All of those wounds I still walk with mentally, he said. We have all died by the misconduct. We have all died by the misconduct of people in authority. In a new study published by the National Registry of Exonerations, 4 researchers analysed 2,400 exonerations from 1989 to 2019. The study defines exoneration as an instance when a prisoner has been officially cleared based on new evidence of innocence, which is interesting because this evidence of innocence phrase is something that I'll refer to later on. Perjury or false accusations, which were lumped together in the study, are the single most common source of such convictions, but police misconduct ranked second, responsible for nearly 850 of the convictions examined in the report, ahead of mistaken witnesses, jailhouse informants, bad forensic testimony, and rogue prosecutors. Researchers found that police bent or broke the rules in 35% of the cases, tampering with witnesses, coercively interrogating suspects, fabricating evidence, hiding exculpatory evidence, and lying at trial. Samuel Gross, a professor emeritus at the University of Michigan Law School and the study's editor, says that when you also take into account the behavior of prosecutors, and some of the cases included both prosecutorial and police misconduct, government officials' misconduct contributed to more than half of all bad convictions. And it probably occurs in other cases because we don't know about a lot of misconduct that did occur, Gross adds. By its nature, it's concealed. And we certainly know about that. The more serious the crime and the punishment, the more likely it is that police and prosecutors behaved improperly or illegally, says Gross, who also founded the National Registry of Exonerations, which tracks wrongful convictions. Official misconduct contributed to 72% of cases in which the person was wrongfully convicted of murder, compared with 32% of non-violent crimes. Quote, there's more at stake and they care more about getting a conviction, he says. It's one thing to let a drug dealer off, but it's another thing to let a murderer off. The correct and virtuous impulse to get a conviction can lead people to cut corners for what they believe is getting the right result. The end justifies the means. There's a ton of pressure to close these kinds of crimes, agrees Brendan Cox, a retired police chief in Albany, New York. Police want to bring closure to the victim's family and security to the community by taking a killer off the streets. This creates a paradox for the police. We are sworn to uphold the Constitution, So this creates a paradox. For the police, we are sworn to uphold the Constitution, so it's our job to actually ensure people's rights, he says. But it's then also our job to try to make sure that we bring somebody to justice. And some of the things that we're supposed to do, that we absolutely should do, that we must do, fly in the face of getting that justice sometimes. One particular form of misconduct has led to more bad convictions than any other: concealing exculpatory evidence. Although prosecutors have largely been blamed for such strategic omissions, police also hid evidence, which then contributed to the convictions of 172 innocent people. One of them was Richard Miles. On May 16, 1994, witnesses at a Texaco station in Dallas saw a black man shoot two men sitting in a car, killing one and wounding the other. Within moments, police picked up 19-year-old Miles, walking home after spending the evening with friends. One witness thought he looked like the shooter. 5 others said there was no resemblance. Police corroborated Miles's alibi. Even so, he was charged with murder and attempted murder. The only thing that I can think of is the police wanted to close out a case and they picked out the first black male they saw, Miles told me. They knew that they would be able to fit this person into a case, and that's what they did. Miles was convicted and sentenced to 60 years in prison. A dozen years later, Centurion Ministries, a non-profit group that reinvestigates questionable convictions, took up his case and found that police had suppressed key evidence. A woman had told police that her ex-boyfriend had confessed to the murder, and another person had sworn that a different man, not Miles, was the shooter. What did they do with that information? Asked Jim McCloskey, the founder of Centurion and the co-author of When Truth Is All You Have, his memoir of the Innocence Movement. They buried it. They didn't give it to the DA, and they certainly didn't give it to the defense. They did no investigation of that information whatsoever. That is clear misconduct and suppression of evidence leading to another likely suspect. Two moments. Just want to check something very, very quickly. I'll check that. I have a funny feeling I've come across the name Jim McCloskey before, and I have a funny feeling it was Saul Kassan that sent me his name and said that I should check on his work. Was it Richard Leo? Let me just check this one moment. No, sorry, wrong person. Tom Sullivan. I thought I'd come across his name before, but no, not to worry. Okay. So, giving you a chance to have a quick look at it. So, Miles' conviction was vacated in 2009. After 15 years, he walked out of prison exonerated. This is police violence of another name, and Miles' story resembles those of other police violence victims in another way, too. The racial dynamics of the case. Gross and his researchers identified official misconduct in 78% of the cases where black people were wrongfully convicted of murder versus 64% for white exonerees. The gap grew when an innocent person received a death sentence. 87% of the cases involving black death row inmates versus 68% for innocent white inmates. All of the officers in Miles's case were white. An underlying theme of these mistakes is that the behavior is not necessarily illegal. Police operate with great latitude as they make decisions about whom to pursue, and once they've trained their sights on a suspect, how to gather the evidence. This is particularly true behind closed doors when they are talking to witnesses and suspects. How many details about the crime can they mention to a witness? How much pressure can they exert to ensure the witness testifies? How long can police hold a suspect to get a confession? How much pressure, how many threats or promises can they make to persuade the suspect to come clean? There's way too much grey area, Cox, the former chief, says. Way too much is left up to everybody's interpretation. Wow, and that's a former police chief. Cox recalls a case from 1997 in which two of his detectives questioned two suspects until they eventually admitted to a murder. Nearly 20 years later, another man confessed to the crime and the two men were released. I think our techniques did show that we had some weaknesses, Cox notes. The National Registry of Exonerations study found that police exacted false confessions time and time again. For example, Richard Lapointe, a mentally disabled man, confessed to the murder of his wife's grandmother after 9 hours of questioning. If you say I was there, I guess I was, he told the detective, but I don't remember being there. He was exonerated after 23 years in prison. And 16-year-old Bobby Johnson, who had an IQ of 69, was threatened with the death penalty until he confessed to killing a 70-year-old man. He was exonerated 9 years later. Okay, what is so disturbing about aggressive interrogation tactics, even many of the legitimate ones, is not merely that they can lead to the imprisonment of an innocent person, but they can pervert the entire process, rendering the pursuit of justice a farce. Consider the case of Davontae Sanford. As I said, this was a case that Eric Jose followed very closely. He was very into this one, and particularly the actions of the DA, Kym Worthy. Early in the morning on September 17th, 2007, the 14-year-old was awakened by gunshots 2 blocks from his house in a rough neighborhood of Detroit. Police responded to the quadruple murder and found Sanford in his pajamas outside his home. What happened next was perfectly legal. Police violated no laws when they interviewed and then aggressively interrogated Sanford for the better part of 2 days and nights. It was legal for them to talk with Sanford, who had been classified in school as learning disabled, without either a parent or a lawyer present. It was legal for them to lie about the evidence and tell him that blood from the crime scene had been found on his shoes when they had not tested them. And it was legal, if close to the line, for police to let the teenager see crime scene photos which showed the layout of the room and the position of the bodies. Megan Crane, who obviously the tweet was about by Steve Drizin, And experts on interrogations say police are allowed to psychologically manipulate suspects and lie about the evidence. They're allowed to make vague threats. Unless you tell us what happened, things are going to be very bad for you, but are not supposed to make explicit ones. You're going to be charged with murder unless you confess, although they usually get away with it. They can't make specific promises of leniency. If you confess, you can go home, but they can make vague ones. They can say, I just want to get you back to school, or I want to get you home to your mum, which is what they said to 14-year-old Davontae, says Crane, who worked on Sanford's post-conviction litigation as the co-director of Northwestern University Pritzker School of Law's Center on Wrongful Convictions of Youth. So there's an implied promise, but that's a pretty blatant implication that you're going to go home. And let's be honest, you're not going home when you confess to a quadruple murder, but a kid might not get that. Sanford recanted his confession 3 weeks later during an interview with a psychologist, saying he felt pressured to confess. So this is so similar, obviously, to Brendan. Hardly need to mention that. If police had merely interrogated him in this manner, the misconduct might not have been discovered. But at trial, police said that the boy had drawn a diagram of the crime scene, when in fact a deputy chief had drawn the diagram and asked Sanford to draw the bodies, which he could do because the police had shown him crime scene photos. The officer was never charged with perjury. Additionally, a hired gunman confessed to the quadruple murder in painstaking corroborated detail, but the detectives never said a word. When the perjury and suppressed evidence was discovered, Sanford's conviction was vacated. All charges against him dropped. He was officially exonerated and received compensation for the years of incarceration, about $500,000. He was 23 by then, having spent more than a third of his life behind bars. Sanford is suing the Detroit Police Department for violating his civil rights. The department has responded that a private lab in Pittsburgh retested Sanford's shoes and claims that blood matches DNA found at the crime scene, even though the lab noted that the preliminary unconfirmed results should not be used for civil or criminal justice purposes. Earlier tests by the state did not identify a match. Sometimes even an exoneration does not end the story. Some evidence suggests that certain types of misconduct are waning, in large part because the innocence movement and DNA analysis have demonstrated the pervasiveness of wrongful convictions. Gross's analysis found that police are less likely to exact or threaten violence during interrogations than they were 20 years ago, and that there's less improper questioning of children in child abuse cases and less forensic fraud. He says many wrongful convictions would be avoided if police taped the entire interrogation. Currently, 26 states require that interrogations be recorded and improved the way eyewitnesses identify suspects, particularly how lineups are conducted. 31 states have made some reforms. But many, like Crane, the interrogation expert, think that police are just getting smarter or savvier. Even though police are no longer allowed to use physically abusive tactics to exact confessions, she believes they are still routinely pried from people involuntarily. Otherwise, why would more than a quarter of innocent people cleared by DNA confess to a crime they didn't commit? It's almost worse than the old days when people could beat suspects into confessing, because it's much harder to prove, she says. You're not going to have photos that document the bruises and cuts that resulted from the physical beating, because it's become much more sophisticated. And now here's a name I have come across. Police have little incentive to change, say Mark Godsey, a federal prosecutor turned innocence lawyer and the author of Blind Injustice, which is a book that I've just started, but I've yet to get through, and even in the foreword mentions that this is a book to work from if you're studying the Stephen Avery case. His book about flaws in the justice system. In the marketplace, a company that gets sued. This will be music to the Hod's ears. In the marketplace, a company that gets sued has a reason to change its practices. Not so with the police. Qualified immunity makes it nearly impossible to sue a police officer, he says, and police unions protect them even after their misconduct comes to light. These two factors together have helped create a culture of power without accountability, which is always a toxic mix. That leaves a long road ahead. Body cams and cell phones have raised awareness about police mistreatment of, well, black citizens, all citizens. In a sense, exonerations are like video footage. They are hard evidence after the fact that something went wrong between arrest and conviction. The new study, the first close look at 2,400 exonerations, suggests that time and time again, the injustice was perpetrated by the police. Richard Miles is not surprised by the findings and thinks the spotlight has been trained on prosecutors for too long. But the trouble almost always begins with the police officer who finds a suspect and presents the evidence to the prosecutor. That's the root, Miles says. If you don't deal with the root, then you'll never deal with the tree of segregation, racism, police misconduct, civil unrest. You'll never deal with it. Now, what I will do as well is I will put in the description a link to a video, a short YouTube video about Kym Worthy and her involvement in this case. Kym Worthy, unfortunately, is one of these prosecutors who has publicly said that even absolute proof of innocence should not matter if somebody has been convicted. Once they've been convicted, that should be it. It's a little bit like I've mentioned before. If you have a game of football and the referee makes a clearly blatant mistake, which leads to a goal for the other side, the result still stands. And there are some prosecutors that go by that. You had your one chance in court. You decided to go to court. You decided not to take the plea deal. So that's it. End of story. Or another way of thinking about it is it's sold as seen. You can't change it. I will pop that video in the description below. So who's here in the chat? Go to the top, shall we? Jaznaz, Dr. Silkman, hi Dr. Paul Woods, Sealer 442, I don't recall, Alice Irvin, Mandy Coat, have I missed anybody? I hope not. That doesn't look like I have. Okay, I think that's everybody. So as I say, please do check out the link below to Kellie Cowles' video. Thank you to Millbilly for alerting me to that. I look forward to chatting with Millbilly sometime during the week, work permitting. And just to point out that this week, hi Zelma, how are you there? This week, Dr. Silkman and I planning to get together on Tuesday, 11 o'clock my time, which is 11 o'clock in the morning my time, which is 8 o'clock over there in Adelaide. We can ask Dr. Silkman how he's getting on with his new neighbour, Ken Kratz. Okay, and other things, see if they've been out for a beer together yet. Okay, I think that's really all I've got time for. As I say, check out the, I'll do it right now. I'll put a link to the video a short video of Kym Worthy, which I think is very, very interesting. Hi there. Okay, catch you all again soon. Bye for now.